Normal haunted places are scary, but haunted churches, a completely different story. So, let's take a look at them. Buckland Abbey is a 700-year-old house. It was built on the site of a former abbey, which was sold to Sir Francis Drake after he returned from his circumnavigation of the globe in 1580. But while Francis was a national hero, locals believed that he had only defeated the Spanish Armada because he'd made a pact with the devil. Sir Francis Drake's ghost is believed to ride across Dartmoor in a black coach, driven by headless horses led by 12 chattering goblins, and pursued by a pack of baying dogs. That is the most metal thing I've ever heard. But it's also kind of terrifying. It's also said that any living dog that hears the spectral hound is said to die instantly. So that's kind of sad. I'd veer away from this place if you have a dog. Egg Hill Church is one of the most haunted churches out there. Legend has it that the crazy pastor of the Egg Hill Church ended the lives of all of his parishioners post-communion, and soon after hanged himself and died as well. Because of this, visitors have reported hearing the cries of victims that died at the hands of the pastor, even though the building remains locked and empty. That wasn't enough. Word has it that the abandoned church and its premises are vandalized and haunted by ghosts. But the interesting thing is, Egg Hill Church did reportedly bear witness to a strange miracle. According to a story, a tornado struck the area during a camp meeting near the church, damaging trees and snapping branches all around. But the tents and the trees at the camp remained intact as people kneeled and prayed during the storm. So could these spirits who are locked inside the church have helped these folks? Who knows? Located in the French Quarter of New Orleans, St. Louis Cathedral is the oldest cathedral in the United States still in use. The first version was constructed in 1718, and the final version of the cathedral was completed in the 1850s. Because of this long history, St. Louis Cathedral has become home to a number of spirits. One of the most famous ghosts to haunt the cathedral is Pierre Antoine, who served there as a priest from 1774 until his death in 1829. Pierre Antoine famously baptized Mary Laveau, the voodoo queen of New Orleans, and later performed the marriage to her first husband. Antoine's spirit has been seen walking through an alleyway outside the church, named after him, while quietly singing and looking in through the stained glass windows. Other ghosts include Pierre Antoine's predecessor, Pierre Dagobert, the pirate John Lafitte, and even the infamous Delphine Lalaurie. So if you ever go to this church, be prepared to see like a ghost or two. St. Mary's Episcopal Church, Kansas City. Father Henry David Jardine, a controversial Episcopal priest, is believed to haunt his former congregation at St. Mary's Episcopal Church. Henry came to the church in 1879, when it was still St. Luke's mission. He caused controversy by introducing Catholic practices, and there was speculation about him having a troubled past. In 1886, Henry died in St. Louis from an apparent chloroform overdose, which the Episcopal Church ultimately deemed was because of him taking his own life. Because of this, he could not be buried at St. Mary's as he'd intended, and the years since his death, visitors have smelled incense where there is none, and seen a ghostly figure thought to be him looking out one of the second-floor windows. During one paranormal investigation, an electromagnetic field detector went off near the altar, and the apparition of a priest was caught on film. In the year 2000, Jardine's body was moved to St. Mary's, and his final resting place now sits below the church's altar, and you'd think he'd stop showing himself around the church, but he hasn't. Constructed between 1882 and 1885, Most Holy Trinity Church in Brooklyn, along with its adjoining school and rectory, is believed to be extremely haunted. In 1897, church sexton George Stells was a victim of homicide in the church, but the criminal was never caught. Since then, a bloody handprint has occasionally appeared on the wall leading up to the bell tower, which is kinda cool. The school was built in 1887 on the site of the church's graveyard, although all the bodies were said to have been moved to a different location. Ghostly activity makes some suspect that a few bodies remain beneath the school. Yeah, building on top of a graveyard, I don't think that's ever worked out well for people. Always hear creepy stuff happening after that. People have seen lights in the gymnasium turn on and off by themselves for years, and heard footsteps when the gym is completely empty. The rectory is also the site of paranormal activity. The bedroom formerly used by Monsignor Michael May who died in 1895, is rarely used because of his ghost making noises in the room throughout the night. Dogs visiting the rectory have also been known to stare at the main staircase, even though it doesn't appear that anyone is there. But at least they don't drop dead instantly like before. The construction of St. Bartholomew, the Great Church, began in 1120. Located in what is now West Smithfield, a monk and Norman courtier named Rahere was responsible for receiving land and funds from King Henry I to build the church. There's a lot of history contained in St. Bart's, including some stories that are particularly dark. A number of homicides and executions took place on the grounds of the church, including the burning of heretics. And today, several resident ghosts and unnamed entities reside within the church walls. The Duke of Argyll, the painter William Hogarth, and the apparition of a priest have been seen in the church. There's also a white mist that appears in the center aisle of St. Bart's, and some reports indicate the mist forms into the shape of a woman. The positive energy is countered by a black mist that is also seen in the church and is thought to be residual negative energy of all the violence seen at St. Bart's. The church's most famous ghost, though, is Rahere himself. The monk has been seen wandering the church, supposedly looking for his foot, which was allegedly stolen from his crypt centuries after his death. Why would someone take a foot? Give that back. That is not nice. Don't steal dead people's feet. It's also said that his ghost appears on the first day of every July at 7 a.m., so that's something. In 1918, a young woman was seen pacing the steps of the First Church of Christ Scientist, located at the corner of 3rd and Ormsby in Louisville, Kentucky. More than a century later, it said her ghost is still seen, pacing and sobbing during the night. This ghost is known as the Lady of the Stairs, or Miss G, which I love. It's believed that Miss G was a member of the prominent Gothrite family, and that her parents attempted to marry her to a much older man after she graduated from high school. But Miss G had already fallen in love with a young man who is currently fighting in World War I. After the war, the soldier, who is believed to be Herbert Fulton Dixon, returned to Louisville, and the young couple planned to leave town and get married in Chicago. That night, the night they were to leave, Miss G went to the steps of the First Church of Christ Scientist, where she and Dixon regularly met. Sadly, Dixon never showed up, and passerby saw a distressed Miss G pacing the steps of the church. As it turned out, Dixon had come down with the Spanish flu and was unable to make it to the church, but the news never made it to Miss G. In a matter of days, both Dixon and Miss G had died from the flu. Miss G's spirit has been seen on the church steps ever since. Sad. It was a sad world before cell phones, right? I got the flu, can't show up, please go home, get out of the cold. As the largest Gothic cathedral in Northern Europe, the stunning York Minster is believed to date back to 627 AD. With a church that old, there are a number of hauntings associated with the church. One of the most famous is that during the 1820s, two ladies from a tour group going around the church found themselves separated and wandering around the building. They encountered a man in a naval uniform who approached one of the women and whispered in her ear. The story goes that he was the woman's brother, who had died at sea. The siblings had made a pact that whoever died first was to come back and tell the other if the afterlife existed. Another apparition said to haunt the York Minster is Dean Gale, who died in 1702, aged 26. He reportedly enjoys sitting in the pews and listening to the sermons. They sound like friendly ghosts, which is, alright. The Snagov Monastery in Romania. This island-bound church, the Snagov Monastery, seems perfect, but has a dark side. The church is the final resting place for one of the most notorious and bloodthirsty rulers of all time. Founded back in the 14th century, more than just one church has stood upon this island. The original wooden structure was doomed, eventually sinking into the surrounding lake, causing locals to believe the island was cursed. Eventually, this island was to become the resting place for, ladies and gentlemen, Vlad Tepes, better known as Vlad the Impaler, the real-life inspiration for Bram Stoker's Dracula. Vlad is said to be buried at the entrance to the church. There is a belief that Vlad had committed more atrocities in his life than any individual ever should, so he was placed at the church's entry so that anyone walking over his grave would have to take some of his sins upon themselves, which doesn't seem fair. There remains some mystery and debate whether Vlad is actually even buried at the church, but the monastery is still said to have ties to Vlad regardless, who had fortifications surrounding the island and a jail and torture chamber on the island itself. In a remote part of South Australia lies an artificial ghost town known as Old Talem Town. This attraction consists of many buildings, most of which are over 100 years old, that had been abandoned and then relocated to this town. There's a massive mix of history and dark events tied to many of these buildings, and some of them are considered to be, of course, haunted. One of the buildings that has gained a reputation for being possibly the most haunted building in Old Talem Town is its church. The Wolseley Methodist Church is feared as countless visitors to the building have claimed to have weird experiences. These include strange sensations, sighting shadow people, and even interacting with a young boy who was thought to have drowned on the property many years ago. Which church on this list were you most creeped out by? Let us know down in the comments. With that said, I've been your host James, and I'll catch you, yes, you specifically, in the next video.